Hello and welcome. My name is Charles Aite. To our top story, the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP, is calling for the scrapping of all increments on the margins recently imposed by the National Petroleum Authority. The Executive Director of ACEP, Ben Boachi, joins us with more via Zoom. Ben Boachi, we're so grateful for your presence here on Business Live. First of all, you have issued out this particular statement, and one instructive part of the statement is the fact that this isn't an innovative way of attracting revenue, considering what is happening on the petroleum sector.
Yes, I mean, you're right. What we have assessed and realized is that even though there are low-hanging opportunities to raise more revenue from a sector that is so riddled with illegality and smuggling, more taxes are being pushed down the throat of consumers. That we find very worrying. And I think right after the passage or introduction of the 30% worse in the budget, we started having this conversation that it could have been better money to ensure that we go after the existing opportunities in the sector and not pile more taxes on the petroleum product. But that is in law, and therefore we can let it slide. But to also realize that whilst imposing the legally established 30% worse, NPA also introduces additional margins, on the back of those increases. It's shocking because, I mean, we are talking about margins that cumulatively generate between 3.5 and 4 billion Ghana cedis annually. And nobody cares to even account for those margins for the consumer to know how much those margins have been used for the object of setting them up. We are only told to pay more when the regulators feel so. And we think that that cannot be the situation. That cannot be the case, where accountability for such huge sums of money is totally missing. And we can go further to even look at the specifics, okay? What these margins are meant for, the UPPF, the bust margin, and the fuel margin. Bust margin, we have been paying bust margin for decades, right? And we don't see, the company using the revenue to deliver on the object of setting up the fund. And that is to keep a reserve so that when we so critically need it, we'll be able to call on that reserve capacity. Bust doesn't have that reserve. And we continue to pay margins to sustain that kind of inefficiency as they are established to be doing in recent times. Beyond that also, Bust is now charging commercial rates. It is actually actively trading on the market with the traders, and they are charging commercial rate for their services. So if they are doing business, why do we continue to subsidize a company that is in business? Because all the tank managers, they invest their money, charge commercial rates, maintain their facility, and grow. But we are paying Bust to keep infrastructure, and then they charge commercial rates.
So you feel there's a disconnect there?
Subsidizing a state company to compete against other private entities that have made their own investment. So the public is just unnecessarily being burdened for an object that is not being met. And that big conversation is really up for us to have on what Bust does with the levy. And all of a sudden we are slapped with additional adjustment, which further stretches the average Ghanaian in this particular time where COVID and high cost of living is rather batting everybody. So
you feel there's a disconnect in the tax elements there, but I want to take you to a particular paragraph of your statement which strikes so much information, and you're calling that government needs to commence to critical review of the object of all the agencies and companies in the energy sector to ascertain the relevance of each one of them under the portfolio of government business to cut the waste and as well translate tax and margins to development outcomes. What is it that we don't know regarding this particular paragraph when it comes to wasteful spending, revenue mobilization, and execution of projects?
So if you check, the price buildup, we have taxes that are actually going to sustain wastage in the energy sector. The power sector alone is taking about 59 pesos currently on every liter for debt that we continue to accumulate in the power sector. That is about 1.6 billion Ghana cedis annually. That is money, if we are able to clear the waste in the power sector, we can use for the development of the education sector, health sector, agriculture sector, and all other sectors that may be relevant to uplift the living standards of our people. But we are paying that money to sustain inefficiency and waste. And that cannot continue to happen. And we've done that for over a decade. And we are still doing it with no end in sight. And that worries us. For how long are we going to do or continue this kind of wastage in the energy sector? And it's the same with all the margins that are imposed. We are not reviewing, nobody's accounting to us what those monies are actually utilized for. And we continue to pay. So it is important that we have a conversation on some of these levies to see how we clean up the energy sector, examine the institutions that are benefiting from these levies, and see which one is relevant, which one is not. How do we retool them for them to be efficient and waive those kind of waste from petroleum products? And even if you did that, you'll be able to use that kind of fund to engineer development, to build the roads, to provide transportation for people and all of that.
I get your point.
So we need to really have a critical look on some of these wastage and see how we fix it going forward.
Great. But Ben, if we could end on this particular note, one of your recommendations, in fact, the fifth recommendation is that the MP, you're requesting that the MP investigates the coincidental adjustment of OMC margins and demonstrates to the people of Ghana how it intends to prevent anti-competitive behavior in the downstream sector. This has been a talk of town, of course, when it comes to issues regarding the adjustment of, petrol prices. What is informing this particular recommendation?
No, I think we are all part, of the process of pushing for deregulation. And that was to ensure that there is greater competition on pricing and also how much profit businesses can make from the consumer. So competition was the essence of pushing for deregulation and also to limit government indebtedness and the waste. But you cannot have a situation where OMCs come together and decide that when government is going to adjust prices, they will come together and overnight adjust their prices with specific margin across the board. That is pure cartelization. They're becoming cartels rather than driving the price based on their costs or participating in the business, which is expected to actually benefit the consumer. But with this particular adjustment that we saw on the back of government announcement, it was almost as if all the OMC decided that this is the time, this is it. Let us adjust our prices. What is even intriguing is that the top 5 were almost at the same level. When we said they should do the 47 adjustment, they added 16 pesos, and all of them went to 6.13 cedis per liter. That is not competition. That is creating cartels. And NPA really has to look into this to ensure that it doesn't persist or it doesn't continue, and that these OMCs will compete based on their cost and their true margins that the competition actually dictates.
Ben Boache, we're so grateful that you joined us, Executive Director of ACEP. They're calling for the complete scrapping of the MPA's recent introductions regarding fuel prices. Away from